Comic Book Savant, episode 382. Welcome back to another episode of the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode is going to be part 4 of the new series that I'm doing that's counting down my favorite 50 comic book movies of all time. You guys responded good to this series. This is something I was inspired to do based off Collider Video. It's a YouTube channel, did their greatest comic book movies of all time countdown. The end of last year leading into the beginning of this year made me think about, with all the releases of the comic book movies, to come up and do, my penultimate or my ultimate countdown of comic book films. Now, we've had a lot of strong entries that have came in this year that are not included on the list, which, maybe next year or sometime down the road, I'll revisit this and revamp the list. But I kept it pretty much everything pre-2018. So, again, this is the 4th episode. We have one more to go after this. I think we've had a lot of fun covering it. But before we get into this episode, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. If you like the content that I do over on this channel, you can go to the comicspodcast.com. It's basically a one-stop shop, that directory to help you find other comic book related podcasts and shows. I've been a part of the Comics Podcast Network for almost as long as I've been doing this show. We're like 13 years in. I've been a member at least 11 or 12 years. It started a couple of years into me already podcasting, but I've been a member since the very inception of the concept. And again, it's just a great place to go if you want to find more comic book related content. It's just a page basically where you can go and search. You'll see podcasts based on particular characters, publishers, teams. It's broken down in so many different genres under the comic book umbrella. So again, if you're looking for something specific, take a moment, check out the Comics Podcast Network over at comicspodcast.com. I would greatly appreciate it if you're looking for more cool comic book related content to listen to. With that out the way, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsor for this episode, which is InStockTrades.com. One of the best places you can go online to find collected editions, trade paperbacks, omnibus, Marvel Masterworks, anything of the sort that's a collected or bound edition, comic book related, you pretty much can find over at InStockTrades.com. They have discounts ranging from 35, 42 up to 50% off certain trade paperbacks. They have a section on their homepage called Deals of the Week, where they update that weekly with books that are 50% off. They spotlight, anywhere from 5 to 7 or so books each week that they rotate out that you can save up to 50% off of. If you place an order that is $50 or more, you get free shipping. That is for only U.S.-based customers. So if you happen to listen to this podcast and you check out InStockTrades.com, you won't get that extra bonus, but you still get all the great savings, which you definitely can save more money than you're probably going to, do anywhere else. And they have some of the most competitive international shipping rates as well. So don't let it discourage you if you live outside of the U.S. to not use InStockTrades.com, because you can still save some money on what you would probably pay locally to get books if you're an international listener. So definitely take a moment, stop by InStockTrades.com and drop them a line and let them know that you did hear about them from the Comic Book Savant podcast. That always helps, because they're a sponsor of the show, that they do know that, their money's being spent wisely by supporting the show. With all that out of the way, let's get into our 4th episode of my 50 greatest comic book movies. We're going to pick up at number 20, which I'm going to go with Spider-Man 2. I want to go with Spider-Man 2, specifically the extended edition. This was released, the movie originally came out back in 2004. I say the extended edition is because when I originally bought the Spider-Man set, the Raimi Spider-Man set on Blu-ray when Blu-ray was first starting out a few years back, and they had two versions of Spider-Man 2. They had a theatrical cut, and they had I think it was Spider-Man 2.5, which is like an extended. It wasn't called a director's cut, but it was a Spider-Man 2.5. The biggest thing about it that makes this particular version from the theatrical version stand out for me, and why I picked this as my favorite version of Spider-Man 2 is they had the big difference. The movie was a slightly darker in tone throughout. I can't remember how many more minutes that were added. I don't think it was an extravagant amount. It was less than a half an hour, maybe 10 to 15 minutes of extra footage. But overall, the cut was a little bit darker than the theatrical release. And then they had a very, very much extended train fight sequence. That whole sequence, that was where the bulk of the time was used. It probably was about 8 to 10 minutes longer, and it definitely shone light on Dr. Octopus being a little bit less sympathetic and more villainous in that fight scene. It was very, very dark. But I love that fight scene, that extended part of the fight scene. And I guess, I think the movie was PG-13, and it might have been hedging more towards a R rating. So they kind of cut this a little bit darker tone. They made just, very specific cuts to kind of, tame the movie down just ever so slightly, which is understandable because it was already a pretty dark movie as is, especially at that time when, this was really starting this generation we're currently in of comic book movies. You didn't want to be too dark because they were trying to stay away from being, anywhere considered R, because they wanted these movies for mass audiences. Hence why most of these movies are PG or PG-13 area. So that is number 20 for me. Number 19 is Captain America: The First Avenger. I really like this Captain America movie. I think really in that first phase, I feel like Captain America: The First Avenger is one of the most underrated movies. It doesn't hold up for me as well now, but I think it's just based on the fact that the Captain America: Winter Soldier and Captain America: Civil War are such great movies that this is a good movie. And then I thought that was great at the time. That's now kind of transitioned to good, just based on how strong the other movies in the trilogy. I still think overall, the Captain America trilogy of movies we've received so far are hands down the best trilogy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this movie is good, not great, where the other two are great and outstanding. This one is still good, but I guess, it's a little bit hokey because it's a period piece that then transitions it or ends off with it being in the present day. Just certain things with the special effects and things of that nature the last time I watched it, didn't hold up as well for me as it has previously, but it's still a really good movie though, by far. Number 18 for me is Logan. I really like the Wolverine, and we discussed it earlier in the countdown. It was on my list. This was everything good from the Wolverine, ratcheted up, and then you had that rated R rating, and it still just had a wonderful story and story arc for the character of Logan, and seeing him come to his conclusion as a character and what they did with him through the X-Men movies and his solo movies. It was a beautiful swan song for Hugh Jackman as the character of Logan. Just a great movie. It's a tough movie to watch because it's so dire, dark. I'm not going to say depressing, but it's just a dire, very dark movie. So I can't. This is not I got to watch this. You space those viewings out because it's just a heavy movie. But it's a very good movie. One of the better movies of last year when it came out. And not just comic book movies, but just movies in general. It's one of the better movies of the year. Number 17 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This movie's kind of divisive with comic book fans for whatever reason. I've talked about this before, that Guardians of the Galaxy, the first Guardians of the Galaxy, is not my favorite movie. I love the characters, but the story, I was always an issue for me. I personally relate to Guardians of the Galaxy 2 on a multiple different levels, because this movie is very much so about discovering who you are, and it has this, this is a big movie about family and fathers and sons, and I talked about this when I reviewed the movie. I talked about this more so in my Black Panther review on. This movie resonates with me on a personal level because of my relationship with my father that I lost. Not so well. It's been quite a few years ago now. We're looking at about, I think, 7 years. I don't try to think about it much, but it's been about 6 or 7 years now. No, this year is 7 years actually. Since I lost them. So it very much so mirrors kind of dynamics of my personal life. So it resonates with me a little bit more whenever I see this movie based on that, because I can relate to it on a very kind of intimate level. So it stands out for me. And I like this movie a ton more than the first movie. And I love one of my favorite scenes of all time, because Rocket has to be like one of my favorite characters in the whole MCU. That scene where he's fighting the Ravengers on that planet, and he takes them all down by himself, is one of my favorite action sequences of the whole MCU. I just love him being just be a raccoon, just kicking butt. I just love that scene. But yeah, that's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is number 17 on my list. Number 16 is Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, and I specify this Ultimate Edition because I do not hold as in high regard the theatrical cut of Batman v Superman. So you have to see Dawn of Justice, the Ultimate Edition. If you buy it digitally through like iTunes, they bundled, I don't know if they're still doing it, when it originally came out, they bundled both versions of the movie. You got the Ultimate Edition as well as the theatrical edition. It is like I can't remember what the runtime is, but the movie is considerably longer. Like, they added like maybe close to an hour of footage, so it was already like a 2.5 hour movie. It's closer to like a 4 hour movie in the Ultimate Edition. But a whole bunch of the movie, a lot of the Superman Lois Lane scenes, I was talking online. I'm in a gaming group or clan, and we were talking about comic book movies just the other day, and we were talking about this movie, and they were unaware of the Ultimate Edition, and I was telling them about it. And basically in Batman v Superman, it was a whole other portion of the movie that was shot that covered KG Beast and his involvement working for Luthor. Lois Lane and investigating the case more. Getting into with the woman that was on trial when they were talking about Superman, the African American lady. It was like a whole subplot there where KG Beast was being used under Luthor's employ, and Clark Kent going into Gotham, investigating the myth of Batman and learning more about him. It's a huge part of the movie that was just cut out by the studio, that was done in the movie, that really makes it a better movie than the theatrical release. It still has its flaws, but it adds a lot more depth, and it has a lot more Superman where you can kind of understand his point of view through the movie. And it was cool seeing him more as Clark Kent and seeing him with boots to the ground working as an actual reporter, which we never really gotten before in any of the Superman movies. So it was really cool seeing that, though it was all cut out of the theatrical cut. But it really elevates the movie to where it's a good movie now, where the theatrical cut makes it kind of meh or a bad movie. This actually elevates it from bad to good, or to decent to good. So definitely, if you want to check that out, and just search for it if you haven't bought the movie or you want this particular version of the movie, just make sure you search. And it's the Dawn of Justice. It's the Ultimate Edition. You still should be able to find it, but just make sure you're getting that Ultimate Edition to get this longer cut of the movie. Number 15 for me is The Avengers. I've watched this movie numerous times more recently in preparation of Black Panther, then later with preparation for Infinity War. And I like Avengers. I still, whenever I watch the movie, since Captain America is probably one of my this is my favorite franchise of the MCU. I'm always bothered by that damn outfit, that Captain America outfit that I think is hideous that they put on him in that movie. So I'm so bothered, and I mention it every time I watch that movie to the point I annoy my wife if she's ever around and I'm watching this movie, how much I hate that outfit, and it bugs me throughout the whole movie. It doesn't hold up as well for me. Over the years, it was historic for what it did, bringing all these individual characters together in one film, and it was successful in that, but it just doesn't hold up as well for me throughout the years. Now, number 14 for me is Avengers Age of Ultron, and I nudged this slightly above the Avengers, more based on what came out of it. At the time, I think it was hampered by these things. But what made it ultimately make this movie so cool when you go back and you watch it now is that everything that they kind of forced into the movie that felt like the movie was bloated was all these things they were setting up for the future. But the thing that makes this movie so cool when you go back and watch it now, that all those things paid off. The mention of Wakanda paid off. We were introduced to Claw, and if you saw Black Panther, you saw how important that was and vital that was, that they set him up beforehand. The stuff as far as the Infinity Stones and Thor going off that set up Ragnarok, which then set up the Infinity War. It was totally vital. Those things were vital, and they all paid off. We know now. At the time, it felt like, oh gosh, why are they stuffing all this stuff in here? And it's the story stuff. It actually led to something, so it makes this movie much better when you go back and watch it now, knowing where those threads that were set in that movie, what they led to later. So that makes me appreciate the movie more, and I definitely like it more than I like Avengers movie. Number 13 for me is Avengers First Class. I had a chance in preparation when I started doing this countdown. I went back, movies that because from time to time you're going to watch some of your favorite movies. So I'll watch certain stuff, but other movies that I hadn't watched in quite a while, I went back to check out and trying to determine where I was going to rank certain movies when I was doing this countdown. So I went back and watched X-Men First Class, and it's a really good movie. I wasn't a huge fan, and I've talked about this before, of the original X-Men movie by Singer. I like X2, but when you get into First Class, it was really what the franchise was floundering coming off of, what was it? X-Men 3, can't remember what the subtitle was to it, but X3, the franchise was floundering, and this was the shot of the arm it needed and extended it out for the next set of movies that we have now. First Class is extremely good, and I love James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender as Magneto and Charles, and that really worked. I was disappointed that Apocalypse didn't pay off their story arc the way I thought it should have been. But this is still a really good movie and really fun and really what the franchise needed to keep going. Number 12 for me is SpiderMan Homecoming. I love Tom Holland as Peter Parker as well as Spider-Man. I think that, over the three actors that they've had play Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and now Tom Holland, I think they all were successful in some point with some rendition of the Spider-Man character. When I go back now, I look at Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, and I don't think it's as successful as at the time, but we didn't have anything to go on. I think Garfield was good on both sides. I just think he had horrible movies around him. I think, like I said, I think the first Amazing Spider-Man was decent. I think parts of Amazing Spider-Man 2 were good, and I think it's a shame that we didn't get more of Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. though they ended up, that second movie was just such a train wreck. They had to do something, and I think Tom Holland as Peter Parker is so believable. He sells it so well, and you believe it so much that you feel it. He gives you the feels, and so like he's gonna go down probably as the ultimate Peter Parker, Spider-Man actor before it's all said and done. And with this first movie, his appearances as in Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, he's already been cemented in just 3 movies, 1 solo movie and the 2 appearances he's had in these other movies. He's really ingrained in pop culture right now as Spider-Man, and I'm liking it, and I hope he gets many more movies, and they continue to be of quality, and that's the biggest thing. That his movies as of quality, and that he gets more than 1 or 2, 2, 3, movies, and because he's still so young, they could really have a long standing. I would like to see. I don't know with today's climate if we would get 5 or 6 movies, but I would love to see that because he's so young. As long as he keeps having fun, I would really like to see where they take this character in the future with this actor behind it, because I really think they could take Spider-Man as a movie franchise to unprecedented levels right now with this kid if they handle it properly. And hopefully Sony, that combination of Sony and Marvel working together, because I think that's what ultimately made Homecoming successful. I don't think it would have been as successful if it was just Sony, or maybe even if it was just Marvel, but the combination of the ideas they both had together was a perfect collaboration to make a really good movie. So I hope they continue that partnership further so they can really go some places with the Spider-Man franchise. Last but not least for this episode, my number 11 pick is X-Men Days of Future Past. I just picked up, and I love Days of Future Past, but they had a Days of Future Past Rogue Edition. I was finally able to get it on sale on iTunes not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago. I have to watch it. I've seen bits and pieces of the extended cut or director's cut or rogue cut or whatever, where they cut out quite a bit. I've heard good things about it and reviews of it, but it was never on sale for me to pick up. I think I got it on iTunes for like $10 a couple of weeks ago. I haven't sat down to watch it, but I love the original movie. I saw parts of the director's cut, or like the ending part of this rogue cut or director's cut on cable, on like HBO or something like that. The movie was already on, and I saw it, and I saw the end of the movie, and then it was like an after credit scene with Trask, and Trask. It was kind of funny because Trask was being held in the same cell that they had Magneto in, that they rescued him from earlier in the movie, which I thought was really funny. But I hadn't seen the cut through and through. So, like I said, I was able to pick it up, and I want to watch it at some point. I might even do a review of it, talking about all the specifics. So I might do a review on that sometime in the future. But really dug this movie. It was a great sequel to the earlier movie we talked about, X-Men First Class. And then, I love the element of mixing the two casts from the original trilogy and the First Class trilogy and bringing them all together, doing a time travel story, doing a really good job telling a wonderful story, and kind of weeding out all the bad things from the different movies from the X-Men franchise, over there at Fox, with them correcting or fixing time at the end. But they didn't follow through on all of the things or explain all the things. They kind of cleared up in Apocalypse, which was kind of disappointing. But they said some of the major things, especially some of the major things from like X3, they were able to kind of wipe away with X-Men Days of Future Past, which was good. A great performance by Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, being coming from the future, going back to the past. That was just a really fun movie throughout. Michael Fassbender again is wonderful as Magneto as well. Just really good. And I probably have to say this is probably one of my overall, probably next to X2, probably one of my favorite X-Men movies of the whole franchise that they've done over the years. So that is my number 11 pick. So that's all I have for you this episode of the countdown. Again, we have one more episode to go where we'll count down my 10 through 1. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Like I said, the response so far has been really good. I'm going to be doing more like countdowns. I started a whole nother series called Countdown where I'll be picking different topics, or you guys can suggest topics to me. You can just, always email me at comicbooksavant@gmail.com or hit me up on social media and say, hey, I want you to cover this on Countdown. And I'll be doing a countdown style list like this. It won't be 50. It'll just be something I can do in one episode where I'll count down certain topics. I've already released, 1 or 2 countdown episodes so far, so definitely check those out. Also, again, check out the website. If you ever want any information on what I'm doing, what's going on with the show, always hit up the website, www.comicbooksavant.com. Also, check out the YouTube channel. It's growing by leaps and bounds each week. I'm putting out more content, like I'm putting out more content here. I'm releasing more and more content over on the YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/comicbooksavant. Check out the Facebook group, all of that stuff on social media. But most of the time, if you want to know what's going on, you can either follow me on Twitter at comicbooksavant or Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram because it's just the easiest social media platform, because you have pictures and you don't have the certain restrictions that you have with Twitter. So again, I've told you, social media has been one of my biggest struggles in the time I've been doing the podcast. I'm learning, but Instagram is kind of the easiest platform for me to learn and get a handle on. I think I missed the boat on Twitter. So like I will copy tweets, copy my Instagram posts or forward them over to Twitter, but I just could never get a handle on Twitter. Instagram has been way easier of a platform for me to get around. But again, that's all I have for you guys for this week. I'll see you again next week for another episode of Comic Book Savant. You guys take care. And again, let me know, in the comments. If you go to the website, you can comment on the episodes. Or if you're on iTunes, just leave feedback. You can leave feedback and leave a review on iTunes, or just email me and let me know like what you feel about about the count, about these about the my favorite movies, and give me like your top 5 or top 10 comic book movies when you reach out to me. I love to hear what your top picks are. But again, I'll see you next time, and you have a good week. Take care.